was born as Siddhartha Gautama in the small kingdom of Kapilavastu, nestled in the foothills of the Himalayas, in what is now Nepal. It was a spring morning, the trees in full blossom, when I entered this world of impermanence and change. My birth was said to be miraculous, though I have no memory of it myself. My mother, Queen Maya, gave birth to me in the Lumbini Gardens, standing and holding onto the branch of a sal tree in bloom. The stories say that I emerged from her right side, took 7 steps, and declared that this would be my final rebirth. But these are simply stories that grew around my life, like vines around an ancient tree. The truth is both simpler and more profound. My father was King Suddhodana, ruler of the Shakya clan. My mother, beautiful Queen Maya, passed from this world just 7 days after my birth, a first lesson in impermanence that I was too young to understand. I was raised by my mother's sister, Mahapajapati Gautami, who became my stepmother and loved me as her own. My earliest memories are bathed in golden light, filtered through silk curtains that billow gently in the warm breeze, carrying the scent of jasmine and lotus from the palace gardens. The palace walls were my horizon, my universe bounded by marble floors that felt cool beneath my bare feet in summer, and warmed by intricate carpets in winter that tickled my toes with their elaborate patterns. I remember the weight of gold around my neck and wrists, the soft whisper of fine cotton and its silk against my skin, the sweet taste of mangoes and honey on my tongue. My father ensured that beauty surrounded me at every turn, that my eyes fell only upon what was pleasing, my ears heard only what was harmonious. Every morning, servants would scatter fresh flower petals along the paths I would walk, their colors vibrant against the white stone, their fragrance rising with each step I took. I had 3 palaces, one for each season of our land. In the hot season, I dwelled in a palace where cool water flowed through channels cut in the marble floors, creating the sensation of living above a gentle stream. Musicians played softly in the courtyards, the notes of their flutes and venas floating through the air like birds. In the cool season, my palace was warmer, with braziers of fragrant woods burning day and night, filling the chambers with the scent of sandalwood and cedar. During the rainy season, I watched the torrential downpours from behind screens of carved wood, listening to the rhythm of water on the tiled roofs, breathing in the scent of wet earth and new growth. My father loved me with a fierce protectiveness that only a parent who is lost can understand. With my mother gone, he seemed determined that I should know no suffering, no want, no unpleasant reality. He surrounded me with young companions, all healthy and beautiful, all from noble families. No one old or ill was permitted in my presence. No mention of death or disease ever reached my ears. When flowers wilted in their vases, they were quickly replaced before I could notice their decay. excelled in my studies and in the martial arts expected of a prince of the warrior caste. My tutors praised my quick mind, my ability to memorize the ancient verses, to solve riddles and mathematical problems. I learned to ride horses with skill and grace, to wield a bow with deadly accuracy, to handle a sword as if it were an extension of my arm. Yet even in these pursuits, there was something that felt empty, like cupping water in my hands only to watch it slip through my fingers. I remember one particular morning in my 16th year, sitting cross-legged on a cushion of gold brocade, reciting the hymns of the Vedas. The words flowed from me perfectly, my voice clear in the morning air. My tutor nodded with approval, his eyes closing in appreciation of my flawless recitation. Outside, beyond the carved window screens, birds sang in the Ashoka trees, and the scent of morning blossoms drifted in on the breeze. Suddenly, a question formed in my mind, stopping the flow of ancient words. What is the purpose of these hymns? I asked. My tutor opened his eyes, surprised by the interruption. They honor the gods, my prince, and ensure the proper order of the universe. But this answer did not satisfy the hunger that had awakened in me. And what of the people who suffer? I asked, thinking of glimpses I had caught from the palace walls, of thin figures moving in the distance. Do these hymns ease their pain? My tutor seemed troubled by my questions. I later learned that my father had instructed all my teachers to keep me focused on pleasurable thoughts, to shield me from the harsh realities of existence. These are matters too complex for today's lesson, my prince, he said with a slight bow. Let us continue with the text before us. And so I did, but the seed of questioning had been planted in the fertile soil of my mind. It would grow in the coming years, putting forth leaves and branches that would eventually lead me beyond the palace walls. As I grew into manhood, my father became increasingly concerned about keeping me content within the palace. He arranged for me to marry, selecting my cousin Yasudara, a woman of exceptional beauty and gentle character. I remember our wedding day with clarity, the air thick with incense and the sound of drums. Yasudara's face veiled in red silk, her eyes meeting mine with curiosity and affection. Our marriage was a happy one. Yasudara brought light and laughter into my life. We spent our days in the pleasure gardens of the palace, listening to music, watching dancers, engaging in conversation about poetry and art. At night, we lay together on beds strewn with flower petals, the moon casting silver light through the windows, painting patterns on our skin. Yet even in these moments of intimacy and pleasure, there was something unsatisfied in me, a question that remained unanswered. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before dawn, I would lie awake, listening to Yasudara's gentle breathing beside me, and feel a strange restlessness, as if I were missing something essential, something just beyond the reach of my understanding. My father, sensing perhaps this restlessness in me, increased his efforts to keep me entertained and distracted. New dancers were brought to the court, musicians from distant lands, exotic foods and wines. He built new pavilions in the gardens, with fountains that caught the sunlight and scattered it like diamonds. But these pleasures, though sweet, were like a thin veil over the questions that continued to grow in my heart. In my 29th year, Yasudara gave birth to our son. We named him Rihula, which means fetter or bond. Looking back now, I see the irony in this name, for indeed, the birth of the son was seen as another tie binding me to the householder's life, another reason to remain within the palace walls. I remember holding my newborn son in those first days, marveling at his tiny fingers, the perfect shell of his ear, the soft rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. Love filled me, but so too did a new and urgent questioning. What world was I bringing this child into? What truths was I hiding from within these palace walls? What lay beyond the gardens and courtyards that had bounded my existence? It was shortly after Rihula's birth that the events occurred which would forever alter the course of my life. My father had always forbidden me from venturing beyond the palace grounds without elaborate preparations, ensuring that my path would be cleared of any unpleasant sights. But curiosity had been growing in me like a vine seeking sunlight. I wished to see the city and the people who dwelled there, to understand the world beyond the gilded cage of my existence. I spoke with Channa, my charioteer and childhood friend, asking him to prepare a chariot for a ride beyond the palace walls. He hesitated, knowing the king's strict instructions, but could not refuse me. Early one morning, as the mist still hung over the gardens, we slipped out through a side gate, the horses' hoofs muffled on the damp earth. The first sight that greeted me beyond the palace walls was that of an old man. I had never seen such a person before, his back bent like a bow, his skin folded and spotted, his hands trembling as he leaned on a gnarled stick. His eyes were clouded, his few remaining teeth yellow in his slack mouth. I stared in wonder and confusion. Channa, I asked, what manner of man is this? What has happened to him? Channa looked uncomfortable, shifting on his seat beside me. This is an old man, my prince. All people grow old if they live long enough. The body weakens, the senses dim, the strength fades. His words fell like stones into the still pond of my consciousness, creating ripples that spread outward. Will this happen to everyone? I asked, though though I already knew the answer. Will this happen to me, to you, to Yasadora and Rahula? Channa nodded slowly, his eyes downcast. Yes, my prince, this is the way of all flesh. No one escapes old age if they live long enough. I fell silent, watching as the old man shuffled painfully along the road, each step an effort, each breath labored. We continued our journey through the city, but my eyes now saw everything differently. I noticed the lines beginning to form on the faces of middle-aged merchants, saw how even the young contained within them the seeds of their future aging. The beautiful facades of the buildings seemed suddenly temporary, as if they too would eventually bend and crumble with time. On our return to the palace, I was quiet, lost in contemplation. My father, sensing something had changed, increased the pleasures and distractions surrounding me. More dancers, more music, more wine. But these could not erase what I had seen, nor answer the questions now burning in my mind. A few days later, I convinced Channa to take me on another excursion. This time, we encountered a person racked with disease, lying by the roadside, their body covered in pustules, their breath coming in painful gasps. The smell of sickness hung in the air around them, and people passed by averting their eyes. What afflicts this person? I asked Channa, though again, I felt I already knew the answer that would come. This is sickness, my prince. Just as all people age, all are vulnerable to disease. The body is fragile, susceptible to countless afflictions. His voice was low, resigned, as if he had long ago accepted these truths that were only now being revealed to me. And there is no escape from this either, I asked, watching as a relative of the sick person tried to ease their suffering with a damp cloth. No one is exempt. No one, my prince. Not kings, not princes, not the wealthy nor the wise. All flesh is heir to sickness. Again, silence fell between us as we continued our journey, but the city had transformed before my eyes. Now I saw not just the inevitability of aging, but the constant threat of disease hovering over every person, like a shadow that could not be escaped. On our third excursion, we encountered a funeral procession. The body, wrapped in white cloth, was being carried on a bier toward the burning grounds outside the city. Mourners walked behind, some wailing loudly, beating their chests, tearing their hair, others walking in stunned silence, their faces blank with shock and grief. And this, I asked, though by now I had begun to understand the pattern of existence that had been hidden from me. This is death, my prince, the final destination of all who are born. When life ceases, the body is returned to the elements, fire to fire, water to water, earth to earth, air to air. Chana's voice was gentle now, as if breaking the news of a dear friend's passing. I watched the procession move slowly through the streets, the grief of the mourners a palpable force. Here was the ultimate truth that had been kept from me, the final certainty that awaited all living beings. From the moment of birth, we move inexorably toward death, carrying our mortality within us like a seed that will inevitably flower. As we turned to head back to the palace, we passed a man sitting cross-legged under a tree by the roadside. Unlike the others we had encountered, there was something striking about this figure. He wore the simple orange robe of a wandering ascetic. His head was shaved. His possessions consisted of only a bowl and a staff. Yet despite his material poverty, his face radiated a serene peace, his eyes clear and calm, his posture straight and dignified. "And who is this, Chana?" I asked, drawing the chariot to a halt. "He seems unlike anyone else we have seen today. There was something about this man that drew me, a quality I could not name but instinctively recognized as valuable. This, my prince, is a Samana, the seeker. He has left the householder's life behind to search for understanding, to find answers to the very questions that trouble you. He owns nothing, desires nothing, and fears nothing. He has renounced the world to find freedom from suffering." Chana's explanation stirred something deep within me, a recognition, a possibility I had not considered before. I observed the Samana closely, noting the gentle smile that played about his lips, the absence of anxiety in his bearing. Here was a man who had faced the truths of old age, sickness, and death, and yet had found some peace in relation to them. As we drove away, I could not shake the image of him from my mind, sitting in perfect stillness as the world moved around him. Upon returning to the palace, I found I could no longer immerse myself in the pleasures and distractions that had previously occupied my days. The dancers' movements seemed mechanical, the music hollow, the food tasteless. Even in the arms of Yasadora, I felt the distance growing, a space opening between us filled with my unspoken questions. At night, I would lie awake, the truths I had discovered turning in my mind like a wheel. All beings age, all beings sicken, all beings die. And if this is so, what meaning can be found in the pleasures and pursuits that occupy our brief lives? What purpose in accumulating wealth and power that cannot be carried beyond death? What comfort in relationships that must end in painful separation? I remember one particular night, perhaps perhaps the most pivotal of my life. I had been unable to sleep, my mind churning with these unanswerable questions. Rising from my bed, careful not to wake Yasadora, I walked to the window and looked out at the palace grounds bathed in moonlight. On an impulse, I returned to our bedchamber, where dancers and musicians lay sleeping, exhausted from the evening's entertainments. What I saw stopped me in my tracks and cemented my resolve. These beautiful women, so graceful and alluring when awake, now lay sprawled in ungainly poses, their mouths open, drool on their chins, their limbs twisted. Some snored, some twitched in dreams, others lay so still they might have been corpses. In sleep, all their artifice was stripped away, revealing the truth of impermanence and the illusion of beauty. In that moment, I knew what I must do. I could no longer live within these palace walls, pretending that old age, sickness, and death could be kept at bay by wealth and privilege. I needed to find answers, to understand the nature of suffering and whether there could be an end to it. And to do this, I would need to follow the path of the Samana, to leave behind all that I had known. With quiet steps, I approached the bed where Yasadora slept with our infant son cradled in her arms. My heart constricted at the sight of them, so peaceful, so unaware of what was to come. I wanted to wake them, to explain, to ask for understanding, but I knew that if I did, I might never find the strength to leave. Yasadora would plead with her eyes if not her words, and Rahula's small hand might grasp my finger, holding me to this life of comfortable ignorance. Instead, I simply gazed at them, committing their faces to memory. I will find the truth, I whispered, though they could not hear. And when I do, I will return. This is not abandonment, but the beginning of the greatest gift I could offer you and all beings. With that, I turned away, my decision made. I found Channa and asked him to prepare my horse, Kanthaka. He protested at first, but seeing the resolve in my eyes, eventually relented. As we led the horse from the stables, I was struck by how loudly his hooves seemed to echo in the night silence, surely enough to wake the guards. Yet somehow, we passed through the palace gates unchallenged, as if the very datas themselves were aiding my escape. Mounting Kanthaka, with Channa holding the reins, we rode to the sleeping city and into the countryside beyond. The night air was cool against my face, heavy with the scent of night blooming jasmine and the earthy smell of the fields after sunset. The stars blazed overhead, countless as the questions in my mind. We rode until dawn touched the eastern sky with fingers of gold and rose. Finally, at the edge of a forest that marked the boundary of another kingdom, I brought Kanthaka to a halt. It was time, I knew, to complete the transformation from prince to seeker. Dismounting, I removed the rich jewelry I wore, gold armbands, necklaces of precious gems, rings set with diamonds and sapphires. I unfastened my silk garments, embroidered with gold thread, and let them fall to the ground. Taking the sword at my side, I reached up and grasped my long hair, which had never been cut and had been oiled and perfumed daily by servants. "What are you doing, my prince?" Channa asked, his voice breaking with emotion. "Please, reconsider. Think of the king, your father. Think of Princess Yasodhara and your newborn son. They need you. The kingdom needs you." His pleas were heartfelt, and I felt the pull of attachment, the bonds of love and duty that had defined my life. "I must do this, Channa, not for myself alone, but for them as well, for all beings who suffer from the inevitable sorrows of existence. If I remain a prince, I might provide comfort and pleasure for some, for a short time. But if I find the truth I seek, I might show the way beyond suffering for all time." With these words, I raised the sword and cut off my hair, the symbol of my royal status. The severed locks fell to the ground, black against the green grass. I exchanged my fine clothes for the simple yellow robe of a wandering ascetic, which Channa had brought at my request. The rough fabric felt strange against my skin, accustomed as it was to the finest silks. But there was also a curious lightness, a freedom in this simplicity. "Take these back to the palace, Channa. Tell my father that I have not abandoned my responsibilities, but have gone to seek a greater understanding. Tell Yasodhara that my love for her and our son is unchanged, but that I must find answers to the questions that burn within me. Tell them I will return when I have found what I seek." I handed him my princely possessions, each one a tie to my former life. Channa wept openly now, taking the bundle of silk and jewels as if it weighed more than he could bear. Kanthaka, my faithful horse, nuzzled my shoulder as if understanding that we were parting. I stroked his muzzle one last time, feeling the warmth of his breath against my palm. "Go now," I said softly, before my resolve weakens. With a final bow, Channa mounted Kanthaka and turned back toward Kapilavastu, the only home I had ever known. I watched until they disappeared from sight, two figures growing smaller in the distance, merging finally with the morning mist that hung over the fields. Then I turned and faced the forest before me, the first step on my new path. With nothing but the robe on my back, I entered the shade of the ancient trees, leaving behind the life of Prince Siddhartha and becoming simply a seeker of truth. The I experienced hunger not as a pleasant anticipation of delicacies to come, but as a gnawing emptiness in my belly. I learned to drink from streams, cupping the cool water in my hands as I had seen commoners do. I slept on the ground, with only a tree root for a pillow, the hard earth a stark contrast to the soft beds of my palace chambers. Yet there was a strange joy in this simplicity, in the direct contact with the elements. The taste of water from a mountain spring was more delicious than any wine I had sipped from golden cups. The sight of the dawn breaking over the hills, painting the clouds in shades of amber and rose, was more beautiful than any entertainment devised for royal pleasure. I wandered south, following the course of the Ganges River. Soon I learned the customs of the wandering holy men, how to beg for alms in villages, accepting whatever was offered with gratitude, how to sit in meditation beneath the shelter of a tree, observing the movements of my own mind, how to live moment by moment, without the countless servants and courtiers who had previously managed every aspect of my existence. My path soon led me to a hermitage where a group of ascetics practiced under the guidance of a teacher named the Lara Kalama. He was renowned for his mastery of meditation and his understanding of the philosophical systems of our time. When I approached him, requesting instruction, he looked at me with keen eyes, seeing perhaps something of my potential despite my obvious inexperience. "You have the hands of a prince," he said, taking my palm in his weathered one. "Yet you wear the robe of a renunciant. What brings you to this path, young man?" I told him of the foresights that had awakened me to the reality of suffering, the old man, the sick person, the corpse, and the samanna. I spoke of my determination to find a way beyond the inevitable sorrows of existence, a path to freedom that could be followed by all beings. Lara Kalama nodded, his eyes reflecting the sincerity of my quest. "Stay, then," he said simply. "Learn our ways. Practice the disciplines that lead to the refinement of consciousness. Perhaps you will find what you seek." And so began my formal training in the spiritual life. Under Lara Kalama's guidance, I learned to still the constant chatter of the mind, to withdraw the senses from external objects, and in enter states of deep absorption. The practice was difficult at first, my mind accustomed to the constant stimulation and pleasure of palace life rebelled against the discipline of sitting motionless for hours. My back ached, my legs cramped, and my thoughts raced like wild horses. But gradually, through persistent effort, I began to experience moments of profound stillness, states where the boundaries between self and others seemed to dissolve, where consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of the body. I progressed rapidly, mastering techniques that had taken others years to perfect. After several accomplished something remarkable," he said, his voice reflecting both pride and wonder. "You have reached the same level of attainment that I have achieved after decades of practice. There is nothing more that I can teach you. Stay and teach alongside me as my equal." His offer was generous, but recognition of the intensity and focus I had brought to the practice. Yet I found myself hesitating. The states of consciousness I had mastered, while peaceful and expansive, had not answered my fundamental questions about suffering. They provided temporary respite, a vacation from the realities of existence, but not a permanent solution. "Thank you, teacher, but I must continue my search. The realms of consciousness you have shown me are indeed sublime, but when one emerges from them, the fundamental problems of existence remain. I seek a freedom that is not dependent on special states, a truth that addresses the roots of suffering directly." Alara Kalama nodded slowly, acknowledging the validity of my insight. "Then go with my blessing," he said. "There is another teacher, Adako Ramaputa, who has attained even subtler states of consciousness. Perhaps his teachings will satisfy your quest." With gratitude for what I had learned, but determination to continue my search, I left the hermitage and set out once more as a wanderer. I soon found Adaka Ramaputa and became his student. Under his guidance, I mastered even more refined states of meditation, reaching the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, the most subtle realm of consciousness recognized in the contemplative systems of our time. Again, I progressed rapidly, soon equaling and then surpassing my teacher's attainments. And again, I was offered a position of leadership, invited to stay and guide others along the same path. But as before, I recognized that while these practices led to extraordinary experiences, they did not address the fundamental problem of suffering. Upon emerging from these rarefied states, one still faced old age, sickness, and death. One still experienced desire, aversion, and confusion. With respect but firm resolve, I left Adaka Ramaputa's community, now determined to find my own way. If the conventional spiritual paths of the time did not lead to complete liberation from suffering, then I would have to discover a new path, drawing on my own direct experience and insight. My wanderings led me to a beautiful place called Uruvela, near the town of Gaya. Here, by a gently flowing river, in a grove of trees that offered shade and seclusion, I decided to settle and intensify my efforts. The location was ideal, peaceful yet close enough to villages where I could receive alms food, with clean water from the river and the shelter of ancient trees. It was here that I was joined by 5 other seekers who had heard of my dedication and were impressed by my renunciation. became my companions, believing that I would eventually discover the truth we all sought. Their names were Kandana, Badia, Vapa, Manama, and Asaji, earnest men who had left behind the householder's life to pursue liberation. During this period, I embarked on a course of extreme asceticism, believing that the pleasures and comforts of the body were obstacles to spiritual realization. If attachment to physical pleasure was a cause of suffering, then perhaps the complete mortification of the flesh would lead to freedom. This was a common belief among many seekers of my time, and I was determined to test it to its limits. I began by reducing my food intake dramatically. At first, I limited myself to a single grain of rice or a single bean per day. Later, I would go for days without eating anything at all. My body, once strong and healthy from a life of royal comfort, began to waste away. My ribs protruded through my skin like the rafters of an old house. My spine could be traced like a string of beads beneath the taut skin of my back. I practiced holding my breath for extended periods, enduring the pounding headaches and the roaring in my ears that accompanied this discipline. I would clench my teeth and press my tongue against the roof of my mouth until sweat poured from my armpits despite my emaciated condition. I refused to lie down, sleeping only while sitting or standing. When exhaustion overcame me and I collapsed, I would force myself back into position, ignoring the protests of my weakened body. I exposed myself to the elements, sitting under the blazing sun in summer, remaining outdoors during the cold rains of winter. My skin turned gray and dusty, clinging to my skeletal frame. My hair began to fall out in clumps, brittle from malnutrition. My eyes, once clear and bright, sank deep into their sockets, giving me the appearance of a living corpse. When I touched my belly, I could feel my spine through it. So extreme was my emaciation. My 5 companions watched with awe and respect, believing that my extreme austerities would surely lead to breakthrough. They tended to my minimal needs, convinced that they were witnessing the path to liberation being walked with unprecedented determination. Yet despite these tremendous efforts, despite pushing my body to the very edge of death, I found no liberation, no final answer to the problem of suffering. Instead, I grew weaker physically and mentally, my meditation increasingly foggy and confused rather than clear and insightful. The mortification of the flesh had led not to spiritual illumination, but to the dulling of the very faculties needed for deeper understanding. I remember one evening, after nearly 6 years of these practices, standing by the river at Uruvela, my legs, little more than skin stretched over bone, could barely support me. As I attempted to enter the water to bathe, a weight of dizziness overcame me, and I collapsed on the riverbank. Lying consciousness began to fade. I had a moment of startling clarity. This cannot be the way, I thought. I have taken asceticism to its furthest extreme and found no liberation. I am now so weak that I cannot meditate effectively, so exhausted that insight eludes me. By destroying the body, I have undermined the very tool needed for awakening. And with this realization, I made a critical decision, one that would change the course of my practice and eventually lead to breakthrough. I decided to abandon the path of extreme asceticism and adopt what I would later call the middle way, a path between the extremes of self-indulgence and self-mortification. I would nourish my body sufficiently to support rigorous meditation and clear thinking, while maintaining the simplicity and restraint of the contemplative life. When I announced this decision to my 5 companions, they were deeply disappointed. Siddhartha has turned away from the struggle, they said among themselves. He has returned to luxury and ease, unable to understand the wisdom of the middle way, seeing only what they perceived as weakness and compromise. They left me, continuing their search elsewhere. Left alone, I began to rebuild my strength. I accepted more substantial offerings when I went for alms, gradually restoring my body to health. I remember the first full meal I ate after years of starvation, a simple offering of rice milk from a young woman named Sujata, who believed she was feeding a tree deity. The nourishment spread through my depleted body like rain soaking into parched earth, awakening cells that had been dormant for years. As physical strength returned, so too did mental clarity. My meditation deepened, no longer hindered by the fogginess of starvation. I began to see more clearly into the nature of experience, to observe the processes of my own mind with greater precision and subtlety. I recalled experiences from early childhood, sitting naturally absorbed beneath a rose apple tree while my father performed a plowing ceremony. There had been a quality of ease, joy, and clarity in that spontaneous meditation that had been absent from my later, more forceful efforts. What if the path to liberation includes joy rather than excludes it? I wondered. Not the fleeting pleasure of sensual indulgence, but the deeper happiness that arises from tranquility and insight. This intuition would prove crucial in the development of the path I would later teach. Feeling sufficiently recovered, I decided that the time had come for a final, determined effort to penetrate to the heart of the matter. One morning, after bathing in the river and taking a simple meal, I noticed a particularly beautiful tree, a pipal tree, later to be known as the Bodhi tree, with spreading branches that offered perfect shelter for meditation. I prepared a seat of grass beneath this tree and sat down cross-legged, adjusting my posture so that my spine was straight but not rigid, my hands resting in my lap. I made a solemn determination, Let my skin, sinews, and bones dry up. Let my flesh and blood wither away. But I will not move from this spot until I have attained perfect enlightenment. It was not a vow made in stubborn pride, but in clear-eyed recognition that the time had come for complete resolution. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ground, I entered a state of meditation unlike any I had experienced before. There was an extraordinary clarity and presence, a dropping away of resistance, an opening to whatever might arise. Rather than forcing my mind into predetermined states, I allowed awareness to reveal the nature of experience directly. The night deepened around me, stars appearing in the vast canopy of sky visible between the leaves of the Bodhi tree. As my meditation deepened, I began to perceive the movement of my own mind with extraordinary clarity. I saw how thoughts arise and pass away, how sensations appear, linger, and dissolve. I observed the constant flux of experience, nothing static, nothing permanent, all in continuous transformation. In the first watch of the night, I directed my attention to my past lives. A stream of memories opened before me, not just of this life but of countless previous existences. I saw myself born in different realms, in different forms, living and dying through eons of cosmic time. I remembered specific details, names, family connections, occupations, moments of joy and sorrow. I saw the endless cycle of rebirth, governed by the quality of actions performed in each life. In the second watch of the night, my vision expanded beyond my own personal history to encompass the lives of countless other beings. I saw how all living creatures are bound to the wheel of birth and death, how they rise and fall according to their actions. I perceived directly how beings are heirs to their karma, inheriting the results of their past choices. I witnessed the profound interconnection of all life, each being's destiny interwoven with others in an immense tapestry of cause and effect. In the third watch of the night, as dawn approached, I turned my attention to the Four Noble Truths, the nature of suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path leading to its cessation. With perfect clarity, I saw that suffering arises from craving and attachment, from wanting reality to be other than it is. I recognized how this craving manifests as grasping after pleasure, as aversion to discomfort, and as delusion about the nature of existence. I saw that the cessation of suffering is possible through the complete relinquishment of this craving, and I discerned the path that leads to this cessation, a comprehensive approach involving ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. As the morning star appeared in the eastern sky, the last veils of ignorance fell away. Complete awakening dawned in my mind, clear, boundless, and unshakable. In that moment, I became the Buddha, questions that had driven me from palace to homelessness, that had sustained me through years of seeking, were finally answered through direct insight into the nature of reality. I saw that freedom from suffering is not achieved through escaping the world, but through understanding it completely. Not through transcending experience, but through penetrating to its true nature. The realization was at once profound and utterly simple. Suffering arises from our relationship to experience, not from experience itself. When we crave what is pleasant, reject what is unpleasant, and ignore what seems neutral, we create the conditions for dissatisfaction. When we see all experiences as impermanent, as devoid of inherent satisfaction, and as not self, we open the door to freedom. As the full implications of this awakening reverberated through my being, I remained seated beneath the Bodhi tree, absorbed in the bliss of liberation. For 7 days, I sat motionless, experiencing the joy and peace of complete freedom. Birds came and sang in the branches above me. Gentle rains fell and then ceased. The sun rose and set, but I remained in that state of perfect equanimity, beyond the pull of ordinary concerns. Eventually, I emerged from this deep absorption and began to contemplate what I should do with the understanding I had gained. At first, I wondered whether I should attempt to share these insights with others. The truth I had realized was subtle, profound, and contrary to common ways of thinking. Perhaps it would be better to live out my life in solitary peace, enjoying the fruits of liberation without the challenge of teaching. But as I reflected further, I recognized that there were beings in the world with little dust in their eyes who would be able to understand if the path were pointed out to them. Compassion arose in my heart for all those still trapped in the cycle of suffering, struggling without direction toward the freedom they instinctively sought. I decided that I would make the effort to teach, to share what I had discovered, even knowing that for many, the message would be difficult to comprehend. My first thought was of my former teachers, Alara Kalama and Adaka Ramaputa. Both were advanced practitioners who might quickly grasp the implications of what I had realized. But upon directing my attention to them, I discovered that both had recently died, passing beyond the reach of my teaching. I felt a moment of sadness that these sincere seekers had missed the opportunity to experience complete liberation. I then thought of the 5 ascetics who had been my companions during the years of extreme practice. Despite their misunderstanding of my change in approach, they were dedicated practitioners with the potential to understand. Using my heightened awareness, I discerned that they were staying in the deer park at Isapadana, now Sarnath, near Varanasi. I decided to seek them out and share what I had discovered. The journey from Bodh Gaya to Varanasi was approximately 150 miles, a considerable distance to travel on foot. I walked slowly, still adjusting to the profound transformation privileges to receive alms food and occasionally engaging in conversation with those who approach me. Some noticed an unusual quality about me, a radiance, a profound peace that seemed to affect those who came into my presence. One such encounter occurred with a wandering ascetic named Abaka. He saw me on the road and was struck by my appearance, my face serene yet filled with an inner light. "Your faculties are clear, friend," he remarked. "Your complexion is pure and bright. Under whom have you gone forth? Who is your teacher? Whose teaching do you profess?" I replied with a verse that expressed my new reality. "I have overcome all. I know all. I am detached from all. I have relinquished all. I am liberated to the destruction of creating. Having understood everything myself, whom should I point to as my teacher? I have no teacher. None like me exists. In a world with its devas, I have no counterpart. I am an arahant in this world. I am the supreme teacher. I alone am fully enlightened. I have attained perfect peace. I am going to Varanasi to set in motion the wheel of Dhamma. In this blind world, I go to beat the drum of immortality." Apaka seemed puzzled by my response, perhaps skeptical of such a bold claim. He shook his head, saying, "May it be so, friend," and took a different path. This encounter reminded me of the difficulty that lay ahead in conveying the profound truth I had realized. Eventually, I arrived at the deer park at Isapadana. As I approached the area where the 5 ascetics were staying, they saw me in the distance. They discussed among themselves how they should receive me, agreeing not to show him special respect since, in their view, I had abandoned the true path by getting up extreme asceticism. "Avaso, friend, Dodama is coming," they said to each other. "He has returned to luxury, abandoned the struggle. We will not rise to greet him or take his bowl and robe. We will simply provide a seat, and if he wishes, he may sit down." But as I drew nearer, they found themselves unable to maintain this resolve. Something in my presence, in the way I moved and the energy that surrounded me, made it impossible for them to treat me as an ordinary visitor. One by one, they rose from their seats. One took my bowl and robe, another prepared a seat, another brought water for my feet. Still addressing me as a vaso, a term for equals or inferiors, they welcomed me and asked about my health and well-being. I informed them immediately that they should not address me as a vaso any longer. I am an arahant, a fully enlightened one, I declared. "Lendir, friends, I have attained the depthless. I will instruct you. I will teach you the Dhamma. If you practice as I direct, you will soon realize for yourselves, through direct knowledge, the supreme goal of skeptical at first. "Friend Gotama," they replied, "by the practice and mode of life you previously followed, you did not achieve any superhuman states, any distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. How could you now have achieved such a state when you live in luxury and have returned to abundance of food?" I asked them a simple question in return. "Have you ever known me to speak this way before? Even when I practiced the most extreme austerities?" They had to admit that they had not. This gave them pause, creating an opening for what I was about to share. There, in the quiet beauty of the deer park, with the late afternoon sun filtering through the trees, I delivered my first formal teaching, what would come to be known as the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the setting in motion of the wheel of Dhamma. I explained the middle way between the extremes of self-indulgence and self-mortification. I described the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path leading to its cessation. I outlined the Noble Eightfold Path, the integrated practice of right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. As I spoke, I could see understanding dawn in the eyes of Khandana. Something shifted in his expression, a recognition, an inner alignment with the truth I was expressing. By the end of the discourse, he had experienced the breakthrough of initial insight, seeing directly that whatever is subject to origination is also subject to cessation. This marked the rebirth of the Buddhist teaching in the world, the first transmission of the Dhamma that would eventually spread throughout India and beyond. In the days that followed, I continued instructing the 5 ascetics, elaborating on the teachings, guiding their meditation practice, answering their questions. One by one, they experienced the same awakening as Khandana, becoming my first 5 disciples. Together with me, they formed the first Sangha, the community of fully awakened ones. Word began to spread about the new teacher in the deer park and his extraordinary message. People from nearby villages and from Varanasi itself came to hear me speak, to ask questions, to learn the practice of meditation. Among the early converts was a wealthy young man named Yasa, who had become disillusioned with his life of pleasure. He approached by night, troubled by existential questions, and after hearing my teaching, experienced a profound transformation. His father, mother, and former wife also became followers, as did many of his friends. Before long, there were 61 arahants, fully awakened beings, including myself. I called them together and gave them a mission that would change the course of spiritual history. Go forth, bhikkhus, for the welfare and happiness of the many, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, welfare, and happiness of gods and humans. Let no two go the the same direction. Teach the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. Explain the holy life that is perfectly complete and pure. There are beings with little dust in their eyes who are perishing through not hearing the Dhamma. There will be those who will understand. With these words, I sent my first disciples in different directions, creating what would become a vast network of teachings and communities spread throughout the country. I myself set out for Uruvela, traveling alone, sensing that my presence would be particularly beneficial there. On the road to Uruvela, in a grove called Kapasaka, I encountered a group of 30 young men known as the Buddhist brothers. They had been enjoying themselves with their wives, but one of them had no wife, so they had brought along a prostitute. While they were otherwise occupied, this woman had stolen their belongings and fled. When I met them, they were searching for the woman. What is better for you? I asked them, to search for a woman or to search for yourselves? This unexpected question stopped them in their tracks. Searching for ourselves would be better. Blessed one, they replied. I invited them to sit and taught them the Dhamma. All 30 attained various levels of awakening from that single discourse and asked to join the Sangha. In Uruvela, I encountered 3 ascetic brothers, Uruvela Kassapa, Nadi Kassapa, and Gaya Kassapa, who were fire-worshipping matted hair ascetics with a large following. Through a series of demonstrations of psychic power and penetrating wisdom, I convinced these influential teachers of the superiority of my path. They and their 1,000 followers cut off their matted locks, threw their fire-worshipping implements into the river, and became bhikkhus. With this large group of new disciples, I made my way to Rajagaha, the capital of Magadha. King Bimbisara had heard of my renunciation years before, as I had passed through his kingdom shortly after leaving home. He had offered me a position in his court then, which I had declined, explaining that I was seeking something beyond worldly power. Now, hearing that I had returned as a fully awakened teacher with a large following, he came to meet me at a place called Vlatavana. Our meeting was both a reunion and a new beginning. King Bimbisara, impressed by the transformation of the Kassapa brothers, who were highly respected in his kingdom, and moved by my teaching, became a devoted lay follower. He offered the bamboo grove, Vilavana, as a residence for me in the Sangha, the first permanent dwelling place for the monastic community. This royal patronage lent legitimacy to the growing movement and provided a secure base from which the teaching could spread. It was during this early period at Rajagaha that 2 of my most prominent disciples joined the Sangha. Sariputta and Moggallana were seekers who had been studying under the skeptic teacher Sanjaya. Sariputta first encountered my disciple Assaji on an alms round. Impressed by his serene demeanor, When Sariputta asked about his teacher's doctrine, Assaji gave a simple but profound summary. The Tathagata explains the causes of things caused and their cessation. This is the great recluse's teaching. This concise statement was enough to trigger initial awakening in Sariputta, who then shared what he had learned with his friend Moggallana. Both came to me with their followers, and within a short time became fully liberated. These two would become my chief disciples. Sariputta renowned for his wisdom and teaching ability, Moggallana for his mastery of meditation and psychic powers. Their presence attracted other seekers of high ability, and the Sangha began to gain a reputation not just for ethical purity but for intellectual rigor and meditative accomplishment. In the years that followed, I established a pattern that would continue for the rest of my life. During the 3 months of the rainy season, when travel was difficult, I would remain in one location with a portion of the Sangha, giving daily teachings and guiding the practice of monks and nuns. These rains retreats became intensive periods of practice and study, with practitioners often achieving significant breakthroughs in their understanding. During the dry months, I would travel throughout the kingdoms of northeast India, walking from village to village, town to town, teaching all who wished to listen. I would typically walk in the cool of the early morning, stopping at houses to receive alms food. In the heat of midday, I would find a quiet place, often a grove of trees or a secluded garden, to rest and meditate. In the evening, I would give public teachings, answering questions, engaging in dialogue with other teachers, offering guidance tailored to the needs of those present. This rhythm of movement and stillness, of teaching and practice, allowed the Dhamma to spread organically through the Ganges basin. Each location where I taught regularly became a center from which the teachings radiated outward, carried by monks and nuns on their own journeys, and by lay followers in their daily lives and work. My teaching style varied according to the audience and the situation. With those of philosophical bent, I would engage in deep analyses of consciousness, causality, and the nature of experience. With simple villagers, I would use stories, similes, and practical advice on living ethically and finding peace in daily activities. With children, I would be playful and direct, offering teachings they could understand and apply in their young lives. One constant in my approach was meeting people where they were, without judgment or condescension. I spoke with kings and outcasts, with learned scholars and illiterate peasants, with sincere seekers and hostile challengers. To each, I offered what would be most helpful at that moment, in language they could understand, addressing the particular suffering or confusion that clouded their minds. Another constant was the emphasis on direct experience over blind belief. A Passico, come and see, was my invitation. I did not ask people to accept my teaching on authority, but to test it in the laboratory of their own lives, to see for themselves whether following this path reduced suffering and brought greater peace and clarity. In the 5th year after my enlightenment, I received word that my father, King Suddhodana, was ill and wished to see me before he died. Though I had not returned a couple of astus since leaving as a young man, I set out for my homeland, accompanied by a large group of bhikkhus. Our arrival created quite a stir. Some welcomed the return of the prince who had become a renowned spiritual teacher. Others, particularly among the Shakya nobility, felt I had humiliated the clan by begging for alms with a shaven head, wearing the simple robe of a mendicant. My father's reaction was complex, pride mingled with lingering disappointment, joy at seeing me again tempered by the knowledge that I had not followed the path he had envisioned. Yet when I taught him the Dhamma, explaining the 4 noble truths and the path to freedom from suffering, his heart opened. Before his death, he attained the stage of non-returner, a profound level of awakening. During this visit, I also reconciled with Yasodhara, who had remained faithful to my memory despite my departure. She had adopted the austere life of a renunciant while remaining in the palace, sleeping on a simple bed, eating only once a day, setting aside luxuries. When we met again, she bowed at my feet, acknowledging the rightness of the path I had followed. Later, when the order of nuns was established, she would join and eventually achieve full awakening. My son Rahula, now 7 years old, met me for the first time since infancy. His first words to me were a request for his inheritance. In response, I had him ordained as a novice monk, giving him the richest inheritance possible, the Dhamma. Some, including my father, criticized this decision, feeling that I had now taken both myself and my son from the royal lineage. As a result of this, I later established a rule that parental consent would be required for the ordination of minors. This returned a couple of asta led to many from the Shakya clan joining the Sangha, including my half-brother Nanda, my cousins Ananda and Devdatta, and many other nobles. This influx of educated, well-connected disciples helped strengthen the growing community, though it also introduced certain challenges as these men had to adjust from lives of privilege to the simplicity and equality of monastic life. As the years passed, the Sangha continued to grow in numbers and influence. Monasteries were established throughout the Ganges basin, often on land donated by wealthy supporters. The most famous of these was Chitavana, a pleasure park near the city of Savathai, purchased by the merchant Anandabindika for a vast sum of gold coins. This became one of my favorite residences, and many important teachings were delivered there over the years. Another significant development was the establishment of the Bhikkhuni Sangha, the order of nuns. This came about through the persistence of my stepmother, Mahapajapati Gautami, who had raised me after my mother's death. She approached me multiple times, requesting ordination for women. Initially, I was hesitant, not because I doubted women's spiritual capacity, but because of concerns about how the inclusion of women would be received in the strongly patriarchal society of the time, and the practical challenges of establishing appropriate safeguards. Eventually, through the advocacy of my attendant Ananda and the demonstrated commitment of Mahapajapati and her followers, I established the Order of Nuns. Many women achieved full awakening through this path, confirming my statement that women have the same spiritual potential as men and can realize the highest goal. Not all developments in the growing movement were positive. My cousin Devdatta, driven by ambition and jealousy, eventually attempted to take over leadership of the Sangha. When his efforts to persuade me to step down failed, he tried 3 times to have me killed, first hiring assassins, then rolling a boulder down a mountainside as I walked below, finally arranging for a wild elephant to be released in my path. When these attempts failed, he created a schism in the Sangha, leading away a group of monks with a supposedly stricter practice. This division was eventually healed, and the story of Devdatta became a powerful teaching on the dangers of ego and ambition on the spiritual path. Throughout these years of teaching, I maintained my own practice of mindfulness and meditation. I typically slept only a few hours each night, rising before dawn to sit in meditation. Even while walking from village to village, I remained in a state of continuous awareness, fully present with each step, each breath, each encounter. My disciples noted that, unlike other teachers, there was no discrepancy between my words and my actions. The teaching and the teacher were one. I spent significant time in solitude as well, periodically withdrawing to remote forests or caves for periods of deeper seclusion. These retreats refreshed my spirit and maintained the depth of my practice. They also served as an example to the Sangha of the importance of solitary contemplation, even for those who had achieved full awakening. As I entered my 50s and then my 60s, I began to experience the physical diminishment that comes with aging. Though my mind remained clear and my insight undiminished, my body showed the signs of decades of traveling on foot through all weather, sleeping on hard ground, and subsisting on alms food that varied greatly in quality and quantity. In my 55th year, I appointed Ananda as my personal attendant. He would remain in this role for the next 25 years. Until my death, Ananda was devoted, attentive, and blessed with an extraordinary memory. He would later recite the vast collection of my teachings from memory at the First Council, allowing them to be preserved for future generations. Despite physical challenges, I maintained a rigorous schedule of teaching and travel well into old age. I was determined that the Dhamma be well established before my departure, that the Sangha be firmly grounded in both practice and understanding. As I often reminded my followers, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. This simple summary contained the essence of everything I wish to convey, a clear diagnosis of the human condition and a practical path to its resolution. In my 80th year, during the rainy season retreat at the Sali, I became seriously ill. The sickness was severe, causing intense physical pain. I recognized that death was approaching, but determined that it would not be appropriate to die without addressing the Sangha one last time. Through an act of will, I suppressed the illness temporarily and called together the monks who were staying nearby. Now, bhikkhus, I told them, I declare to you, all conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence. This exhortation to mindfulness and effort would be my final teaching to many of them. I then announced that in 3 months' time, I would attain final nibbana, the complete cessation that comes at the death of a fully enlightened being. Word of this announcement spread quickly through the Sangha and the lay community. Many came to see me during these final months to receive personal teachings, to express gratitude, or simply to be in my presence one last time. I continue to teach daily, addressing the specific concerns and questions of those who came, offering final instructions on how the Sangha should function after my departure. With Ananda and a group of monks, I set out on a final journey northward. Though moving slowly due to age and illness, I was determined to reach Kusanara, where I sensed that my life would come to its end. Along the way, I accepted a meal from a blacksmith named Kunda. The food included Sakara Madhava, a dish whose exact nature is now debated, but which caused a serious dysentery that further weakened my already frail body. Despite severe pain, I insisted on continuing the journey, stopping frequently to rest. At each stop, I continued to teach, emphasizing different aspects of the Dhamma depending on who was present. My compassion was such that even in my final illness, I was more concerned with the welfare of others than with my own comfort. Eventually, we reached the sal grove on the outskirts of Kusanara. I instructed Ananda to prepare a bed between twin sal trees, placing it so that my head would be to the north. Though it was not the season for flowering, the sal trees burst into bloom, their petals showering down upon me in a natural tribute. As news spread that the Buddha was about to pass away, local Malas, the ruling clan of the region, came to pay their respects. A wandering ascetic named Subhadda arrived, requesting a final opportunity to ask questions. Though Ananda initially tried to turn him away, not wanting to retire me in my final hours, I called Subhata forward. His questions were sincere, his heart ready for understanding. After hearing my teaching, he became fully awakened, the last direct disciple I would have in this life. As the night deepened, I addressed the assembled monks one last time. Now, bhikkhus, I address you, transient or all conditioned things. Strive on with awareness. Then I asked if there were any final questions, any doubts about the teaching or the practice that needed resolution. The monks remained silent, either because they had no questions or because emotion prevented them from speaking. I then entered the jhanas, the stages of meditation absorption, moving systematically through each level from the first jhana to the highest formless attainment. Then, descending back through the jhanas to the fourth, I passed away, attaining parinibbana, final release. At the moment of my passing, the earth shook, thunder sounded in the clear sky, and those who were not yet free from passion wept and tore their hair. Those who were further along the path remained mindful, reflecting and permanent are all formations. How could it be otherwise? My body was cremated for the full honors of a universal monarch, a fitting tribute not to my royal birth but to the spiritual sovereignty I had attained. The relics from the cremation were divided among various kingdoms and clans, and stupas were erected to house them, becoming centers of devotion and pilgrimage for countless generations to come. Thus ended my life to Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Yet the teaching continued, passed from person to person, carried across countries and continents, translated into numerous languages, adapted to diverse cultures. The Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the practice of meditation, the cultivation of wisdom and compassion, these elements of the Dhamma have remained vital for over 2,500 years, offering the same possibility of awakening that I discovered under the Bodhi tree. If I were to reflect now on the entirety of my life and teaching, I would emphasize several key points that seem particularly relevant for those still walking the path. First, the universality of suffering and the possibility of its cessation. No human life escapes the experience of dissatisfaction, loss, and difficulty. Yet this suffering is not a punishment or an arbitrary fate. It arises from identifiable causes, primarily from craving and ignorance. And because it is causes, it can cease when those causes are removed. This is the fundamental message of hope that underlies all of my teaching. Second, the importance of direct experience over dogma or belief. I never ask my followers to accept teachings on blind faith, not even my own. And instead, I encourage critical investigation, personal verification, testing the teachings in the laboratory of one's own life. The Dhamma is not a set of beliefs to be accepted, but a path to be walked, a raft to carry one across the flood of suffering to the further shore of freedom. Third, the middle way between extremes, whether in lifestyle, in view, or in practice. I consistently taught moderation and balance. Extreme asceticism leads to weakness and foggy thinking. Indulgence in sense pleasures leads to addiction and complacency. Even in meditation, a balance is needed between effort and relaxation, between focus and receptivity. Finding and maintaining this balance is itself an ongoing practice, not a fixed formula. Fourth, the practical emphasis on ethics is the foundation of the path. Without ethical conduct, the mind remains agitated by remorse, fear, and the consequences of harmful actions. With a foundation of non-harming, generosity, and restraint, the mind naturally becomes more peaceful and receptive to deeper insights. Ethics is not a mere preliminary to spiritual practice, but an integral part of it, both expressing and developing the qualities of wisdom and compassion. Fifth, the recognition of impermanence as a doorway to deeper understanding. All conditioned things arise and pass away: bodies, feelings, thoughts, relationships, societies, civilizations. This is not a cause for despair, but an invitation to live with greater awareness and appreciation, to hold what is precious without grasping, to work for positive change while accepting the inevitability of transition. Sixth, the non-self nature of experience. What we take to be a solid, permanent self is actually a process, a flow of constantly changing phenomena without a fixed core or essence. This insight, when deeply understood, liberates us from the burden of self-preoccupation, from the endless project of shoring up and defending an illusory identity. It opens the way to a more fluid, interconnected, and compassionate way of being. Seventh, the power of mindfulness as a tool for transformation. The simple practice of present moment awareness, applied to body, feelings, mind states, and the patterns of experience, is revolutionary in its effects. It allows us to step out of habitual reactivity, to see clearly the processes that create suffering, and to respond with greater wisdom and compassion. In a world of increasing distraction and speed, the cultivation of mindfulness is more relevant than ever. Eighth, the integration of wisdom and compassion. Clear seeing without kindness can become cold and disconnected. Compassion without wisdom can become sentimental and ineffective. Together, they form the two wings that enable the bird of practice to fly. This integration is expressed in the four immeasurables: loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity, qualities to be cultivated toward all beings without exception. Ninth, the the importance of spiritual friendship and community. While each person must walk the path for themselves, the journey is supported and enriched by connection with fellow practitioners. As I told Ananda, spiritual friendship is not half of the holy life, but all of it. The Sangha provides encouragement, guidance, challenge, and inspiration, reflecting back to us both our blind spots and our Buddha nature. Finally, the reminder that awakening is possible in this very life. The goal of the path is not a distant paradise or a better rebirth, but the direct experience of freedom available here and now. Throughout my teaching career, I encountered people from all walks of life, kings and paupers, scholars and illiterates, young and old, who realized this freedom for themselves. Their examples stand as testimony to the human capacity for awakening, regardless of circumstances or background. These themes weave through the 84,000 teaching doors that I opened during my lifetime. They form a coherent whole, each aspect supporting and illuminating the others. They are not an abstract philosophy, but pragmatic psychology, a roadmap for the journey from suffering to liberation, from confusion to clarity, from reactivity to responsiveness. If my life and teaching have any lasting value, it is in pointing to this possibility of awakening that exists within each person. I did not claim to be superhuman or divine, but simply one who had discovered an ancient path and walked it to its conclusion. What I found, anyone can find with appropriate effort, guidance, and conditions. The invitation of the Dhamma is always present, calling us to look deeply into our own experience, to question our assumptions, to live with greater awareness and compassion. It is a path not of escape from life, but of full engagement with it, seeing clearly both its beauty and its difficulty, responding from a place of wisdom rather than reactivity. As you continue on your own journey, may you find the courage to look honestly at suffering, yours and that of all beings. May you discover the causes of that suffering and the possibility of its cessation. May you walk the path with diligence and joy, supporting and being supported by fellow travelers. And may you taste for yourself the freedom that is our true nature, the peace that passes understanding, the compassion that embraces all of life. Sab Sada Sukhihantu, may all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings walk the path of awakening. May all beings realize the perfect peace of liberation.